Hello friends, Punkrat with a very serial documentary. I made a video about 3 months ago talking about the private server community. I noticed many people within the comment section of that video mentioning that they were actually unaware of the story that led to Blizzard's announcement of Classic WoW 2 years ago. I figured I'd make a documentary style piece to cover the story. So here it is, the entire story, going back over a decade. It all started in 2007. A seed was planted in the fertile soil, which are the original World of Warcraft forum boards. The seed was planted, germinating slowly in the damp grounds. It was a seed of skepticism and discontent, a paranoia of what was to come. Heretics, they called us, doomsayers, fearmongers. But unfortunately, those fears were placed in reality. In January 2007, the Burning Crusade had launched. Although it was foreshadowing to what was to come, it was still one of the greatest World of Warcraft experiences in the history of the game. TBC hit most marks. It retained the core MMO features that made the game tick, while still being entry-level friendly enough to strike a good balance between the different types of players. But despite that fact, it exemplified a trend which was worrying to the most die-hard of World of Warcraft fanatics. The first change was the death of World PvP with the additions of flying mounts. Along this came the annexing of old zones in Azeroth, since the new expansion was almost entirely focused on the Outlands. No life losers were dying to taste the blood of casual scum trying to do their quests, but since they were all flying up in the sky, hiding from the lurkers below, the dangerous open world dynamic was no more, and the casuals had become a protected class. Fast forward a couple years, and World of Warcraft was at an all-time high heading into Wrath of the Lich King. The allure of Arthas as the main antagonist was the only marketing necessary. Although World of Warcraft was the biggest game of the time, bringing in more money than you could ever imagine or ever really dream for, it wasn't enough for the corporate monarchs at Blizzard Entertainment. Going into Wrath of the Lich King, the plan was to expand the player base even further into the casual markets. Random Dungeon Finder now teleported you to your dungeon. Heroic dungeons were so easy that you could blast through so many within one day that it would give you enough badges to fully gear out your character raid ready. The raid tiers were trivialized, raid attunements removed, further exacerbating that same issue. Uldar might have been your favorite raid within Wrath of the Lich King, but it became largely trivialized by the time ICC and Trial of the Crusader were released. The game started to revolve around daily quests, pulling you further and further away from an organic MMO experience. This, however, was only the beginning of the end. A couple months before the Wrath of the Lich King released, the greatest piece of foreshadowing was about to take the player base by storm. In July 2008, Vivendi Games, the parent company of Blizzard, merged with Activision, and the era of Activision Blizzard was thrusted upon us. The players and developers were now under the reign of their overlords at Activision Games, and World of Warcraft was never to be the same again. The golden age of Warcraft had seemingly come to an end. The next decade was going to be a downward spiral predicted by the oracles of the World of Warcraft forums from back in the Burning Crusade. And Activision Blizzard had found their new lapdog, a sinister corporate underling who corrupted everything he touched. This demon's name was Jos Alianak Brakos the Corrupt. He failed his way to the top of every single studio that he touched. He decimated Star Wars galaxies and escaped the burning ship before it all went to hell. He then brought his cursed omen to the World of Warcraft team as a lead game developer. He became one of the main faces of the World of Warcraft team in Cataclysm, which was the true beginning of the end for retail World of Warcraft. Cataclysm released with an entirely new game engine, and the old feeling of WoW had been axed, classes redesigned, and most importantly, the entire concept of this expansion was that Deathwing had destroyed the entire world of Azeroth, and with that came a complete redesign and oversimplification of all zones and all quests. making the entire experience a linear theme park ride with little to no challenge at all. The game never recovered from this. Cataclysm started off strong, largely led by the cinematics and marketing campaigns that Blizzard pushes on every release. But the more people realized what was going on to their beloved game, the more people started to drop off like flies. And by the end of Cataclysm, the worst game design decision ever made was announced. The introduction of LFR, or Looking for Raid. No longer did you need to forge a community to experience Endgame. No longer did you have to try. The game and its mysteries were now handed to you on a silver platter in the style of a queued automated raid simulation with LFR. As the expansions went by, these greedy attempts at expanding the player base continued unabashedly. Twinks were removed from the game. All classes became more and more homogenized, and the Fun Police meme had been born. Not to mention, an in-game shop was introduced, targeting the most mentally deficient of players with cheap impulse buy marketing tactics. Throughout this entire downfall, J. Alianak Brakos' narcissism knew no bounds. He was the leading vision of World of Warcraft from his ivory tower, designing the game entirely around his own needs and wants, not the players. At one BlizzCon, he was challenged about flex rating, and subconsciously, the truth came out. He stated how flex rating was designed for players like himself and his guild of crusty boomers, a guild with no ability to compete in the raid scene, but still wanted to raid extremely casually. He talked about how flex rating allowed him and his retirement home guildmates to collect epics as well and join the party. He was out of touch. He didn't know how to connect with the audience of his product on a human level, because in fact, he was not human. It was revealed on a 4chan board that he was actually created in the same laboratory as Mark Zuckerberg in the underground facilities of Area 51. He was synthesized in that lab by Joe Dante, the director of the movie Gremlins from 1984, which was the same year that Jalen Brack graduated from high school. Coincidence? I think not. The game we all knew had become a mere shadow of itself. It became an amalgamation. Activision had infiltrated and infected the Blizzard Entertainment offices like a virus. This pushed more and more of the core player base away. And once games like Dota 2, League of Legends, and other mainstream alternatives hit the market, many players ditched the World of Warcraft for something fresh and new. But Blizzard still had that one demographic that they had spent so many years chasing in the push for extending profits for the shareholders. The consumers who don't ask questions, but merely consume, and consume, and consume. They milked and milked and milked their target consumer until there was just no more milk left in the teat. This model was not sustainable. Once games like Fortnite came out, the dances in Fortnite were just too much for these normie consumers to resist. They swiftly ditched World of Warcraft so they could floss and dab to their heart's content. Things looked bad, but there was still hope on the horizon, a glimmer of hope from years prior, a hooded Avenger who traveled all the way to the Eye of Sauron itself, BlizzCon. He may look just like a boy to you, but he is no mere boy. Just like Edward Elric from Full Metal, looks can be deceiving. He was one of the most powerful mortals in the land. He fought his way to the council of narcissistic game developers at Activision's lair, and set off a chain of events which would forever be mired in the history of Azeroth for generations to come. He is an unspoken hero. In fact, his name is still unknown to this day, an unknown martyr who thrusted himself into the spotlight, sacrificing his body for the greater good of his people. A hero of the Horde, a hero of the Alliance. His legacy knows no faction. He is the avatar of Azeroth. On this faithful day, the words were spoken.
Have you ever thought about adding servers for previous expansions as they were then?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
Oh. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
The reaction from J. Alianak Brakos was, "You think you do, but you don't." His narcissism again was on full display. This was the event that our Holy Avenger triggered, which caused a line of following events that led to today. Prohibition or neglect of demand does not squelch the demand. So the players did exactly what you think they would: circumvent the system. The statement alone triggered a huge influx and demand for private servers, unofficial vanilla realms, developed by sweaty Europeans smoking cigarettes in their mother's attics. The seed had officially bloomed. Server after server, each one outdoing the last, until peak private server vanilla experience was achieved. A group of selfless devs grouped together to form the greatest private server movement to ever grace the internet. The name was Nostalrius Progressive Realms. It was unlike any server the player base had ever seen, and like anything of quality on the internet, it went viral through the power of word of mouth. 1 million accounts created, 15,000 players online every single day, with thousands waiting in the queue. A thriving community, bringing players from all realms together on one mega vanilla journey. But it was almost too good to be true. And as you would think, it didn't exactly end well. They got too big for their own good. The previous private realms were smaller and more spread out, but Nostalrius broke that notion. In fact, they shattered it. All of the other servers almost died overnight after the Nostalrius launch. Nostalrius absorbed all of their players, while simultaneously building enough name recognition and community notoriety to attract brand new, disgruntled retail players to the classic experience. 1 million accounts created on a private server. The Activision team of lawyers were clearly put on the task. See, despite everything that the Nostalrius team did well, there was one fatal kink in their armor, an Achilles heel, so to speak, an oversight that at the time seemed like a bad idea, but in the grander vision, in hindsight, it was destiny. The actual server infrastructure that the Nostalrius team was hosted on was located in France. See, most private servers were hosted in Russia. This gave them protection from American cease and desist letters. Vladimir Putin would wipe his arse with them and light them on fire. The server was left with no choice but to close shop. It became a viral sensation. Videos started to spread of thousands of players in Ironforge, Orgrimmar, Stormwind, preparing for the Azerothian apocalypse. It was done, and overnight, hundreds of thousands of World of Warcraft's most die-hard fans were left without a home, cold on the streets. But throughout history, it's always been the most disenfranchised, desperate masses that rise up and revolt to overthrow the throne. Which is exactly what happened. The community was not about to take this one lying down. It was time to form a coalition and send a message to the corporate overlords at Activision Blizzard. It was time to take matters into our own hands. So what did the vanilla soldiers do? Exactly what you'd expect. Meme. The community memed, and memed, and memed, and memed some more. It became a movement. So Activision did exactly what you would expect from a corrupt, tyrannical power. They deployed their militant shills. They mounted a defense of the Blizzard IP, but severely underestimated their opponents. It was a futile effort. Once again, Activision Blizzard was severely out of touch. Their feeble attempt at countering the storm headed in their direction was swiftly overwhelmed, their fortifications decimated. I still have my battle memorabilia from the clash all those years ago. 300,000 soldiers amassed, and the strategy was set in motion. We had the men. All we needed was an entry point, and we found our Trojan horse. His name was Mark Kern, a founding member of the vanilla team, an exiled agent, a based Twitter Chad, the epitome of the red pill. He was perfect. The strategy was set, the soldiers were packed in the Trojan horse, and Mark Kern gave us access. Mark Kern brought the petition straight to the top of Blizzard, right to Mike Morhaim's lair. Activision had been infiltrated, and our Trojan horse opened the door for what was to be the first steps towards a glorious victory. The Nostalrius developer team was invited to a roundtable discussion at the Blizzard HQ. They went to work advocating for the classic experience, and we couldn't have asked for better ambassadors. They gathered all the stats from the Nostalrius days and presented the potential of classic, explained the theory behind why vanilla was in such high demand. And lo and behold, as rumored, at the next BlizzCon, a familiar face resurfaced on the stage. The ultimate irony, the demon had seemingly been enslaved. J. Alianak Brakos entered the scene, looking subdued as ever and remorseful. It was the perfect retribution. He announced the official confirmation that classic WoW was being developed for the player base. The tune had changed, and the universe had seemingly been restored to its rightful order. The battle had been won, but the war still rages on. Flash forward today, and we are on the verge of realizing the dream. We've recruited Lord Baldicus to carry our flag and merge his Asmoncuck army into the battle line, doubling our collective power. They say, if you can't beat him, join him after all. Lord Baldicus had become an ambassador for the classic dream. With Lord Baldicus at our side, the word has spread to the masses. Millions have amassed behind the soldiers of classic, forming the final frontier. The future is inevitable, and our collective power is not to be underestimated. On August 26th, the soldiers charge the gates, and J. Allen Brack will be brought to his knees. Banished to another realm, it seems that the war has been won, at least for now. So get ready, friends. It's time to claim the spoils of war. We fought hard for this day, and again, on August 26th, we finally return to Sanctuary, Vanilla World of Warcraft. Welcome home.